I also see a lot more individual support for students now, a lot more interventionists, reading specialists supporting children in early childhood now than I did when I started teaching. Oftentimes, I think in the early part of my career as a kindergarten teacher, I would hear, yes, we have an interventionist, but they work mostly with our older kids. And now early childhood intervention has really, in the schools that I observe, become an important priority for our teachers and our students.
Welcome to the Little Brain Campaign. I'm Dr. Lauren LaRose, a child and adolescent psychiatrist.
And I'm Jessica Eisenstadt, a licensed professional counselor.
We're here to be straight with you about children's mental health.
And we're not afraid to challenge the trends that are out there about anything related to kids.
And we're not afraid to challenge each other either.
If you're looking to be validated from two moms that are in the trenches, you're in the right spot.
Yep, no fluff here, just some honest conversation with a side of sarcasm.
Let's get into it. Hello, Big Brains. Thanks for joining us on the Little Brain Campaign podcast. We're your hosts, Jessica
And Lauren.
And today we have the pleasure of having Katie Gallagher here. We're going to get into a lot of good stuff. Katie, will you please just do like a little elevator pitch about who you are, what you do?
Sure. So I have been working in education. I had to count how many years. That will be 20 years this year.
Congratulations.
I know.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud of that. And most of those years, I was a classroom teacher, mostly in kindergarten. Kindergarten is sort of my sweet spot. I think if you ask most teachers, do you have a favorite age?
Yeah.
5 and 6 is probably my favorite. But I've taught pre-K through 4 through second grade. I've taught in Catholic schools, in public schools, in independent schools.
Okay.
The last 3 years, I've worked as an interventionist, working mostly with early childhood, so mostly pre-K 3 through first grade students.
Okay.
And I work with them offering individual support, working with their parents, working with our teacher teams to try to support kids in the classroom. I'm also an educational consultant, and I work with mostly early childhood through third grade teachers and administrators to provide professional development and then teacher support in the classroom too. So I kind of get the best of both worlds in my two jobs. I get to work directly with kids and parents, and then I get to work with teachers and administrators too.
That's great. Okay, so my first question is, whatever. Within this 20-year span, what academic and behavioral trends, needs have you seen like within that 20 years span?
Yeah, so it's really funny because I think if you talk to any teacher who's been teaching for a while, you see kind of these ebbs and flows in what curriculum and what focuses are needed in the classroom. And what I've seen in the past couple of years has really made me happy to see kind of these current trends. Okay. But I'm seeing two big focuses when I meet with administrators. The first thing I do as a consultant is say, what kind of professional development do you want and how can I support your teachers? And then if I'm fortunate enough to get to meet individually with the teachers too, I ask them the same question. And what they kind of overwhelmingly, what I've heard is we want more child-centered learning. So we want more cooperative learning opportunities.
What does that mean?
A great program that I introduce a lot is project-based learning.
Yeah.
So students get to work together to create a project. And the idea is that the teacher's not the source of all knowledge and the students are absorbing all that knowledge, right? It's that we're all working together as a community to learn together.
Okay, great.
And the other kind of big trend I've seen is this need for social emotional curriculum.
Yeah.
I have teachers coming to me, second grade teachers, third grade teachers. My students are just struggling with their interactions with one another.
Yeah.
With problem solving on the playground.
Yeah.
With emotional regulation. How can I support them in the room and just make my classroom environment productive for learning?
Yeah.
And so those have been the two kind of big things that I've heard when I talk to them. And what's really neat about those two things is that they're really related, right?
Yeah.
If you want to have this project-based learning unit where you had this amazing discussion about dinosaurs with kindergarten students, right? They need to know how to speak in front of a crowd, how to listen when somebody else talks, how to wait their turn to speak. Man, that's hard for 5-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
So teaching those skills is essential to creating these opportunities for cooperative learning. So the two work together.
Do you think, okay, when you're talking about like teachers wanting to know how to manage problems that come up between kids, okay, is it that like kids are having these problems more? What's the issue?
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing from teachers, I think, more than I heard maybe 5-10 years ago. And I think, and this is just kind of a theory from talking to teachers, that the pandemic has really made it difficult for our students that are now, I mean, it's made it difficult for all of us, but our students for now, first, second, third grade students who didn't have that same early childhood experience that a student would have who's now in high school or like middle school.
Okay.
They didn't have those opportunities for social interaction to sort of organically learn, how do I play with a friend? How do I wait my turn? How do I engage with different people?
How do I get a desire met?
Right. When we were teachers, I was a classroom teacher during the pandemic, and it was like, here's your pod of kiddos, right? And here's your 2 buckets of toys that you can play with. And I think we needed to do that to keep everyone safe, but students didn't have those opportunities to engage with everyone in the ways that we know are the most productive. So I think knowing that their early childhood experience was different than kind of the group before them, we may need to backtrack a little and explicitly teach some of those social skills. And have curriculum in place that teach those skills like turn taking, cooperation, self-control in ways that we didn't with our previous students.
Yeah. And so when I was talking to you yesterday, I'd never thought about, so I've heard a lot of like, oh, it's because of the pandemic. Like that's the reason behind X, Y, or Z. I've never really thought about it as a reason why, or a potential reason why behaviors are popping up in schools now. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and I think it depends on like where that kid was developmentally when the pandemic hit. Like you're going to see a different set of problems for the kids that were in middle school, a different set of problems for the kids that were in high school, college. And like, this is what you're seeing because like, this is the age group that you're dealing with. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so like, if you had like, let's say it's 2020, like March or whatever, and you have a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. And so then it's like 2 years of really inconsistent or totally zero interactions with people that aren't like in your house. Well, now you don't know really how to engage with another person that's developmentally where you are, chronologically where you are, and you don't know how to like navigate things that are uncomfortable.
Yeah, because you weren't exposed to it.
You weren't exposed to it.
I think it teaches us something that we as early childhood educators already knew, that social emotional skills are as important as academic skills in early childhood.
I mean,
almost
it's more important
When
because
we miss that,
more.
I'd
say more.
Yep, more. Like if you don't have the capacity to interact with or know how to do any of that, then you don't have the capacity to focus and retain and reproduce information. Like you don't.
Right.
If you don't know how to interact with the world, you can't learn about the world.
Right. 100%.
Anyways, go. I know you're about to say something.
Okay. Have you been seeing any trends in your 20 years in terms of education, teaching, classroom management?
Like styles?
Yeah.
Of?
Yeah.
Okay.
It varies so much between schools and between teachers.
Yeah.
In general, I do feel like when I started teaching, it was very much, I started in a Catholic school and then an independent school, the teacher having the information and being the source of the information for the student. And in general, I think we're leaning towards more student-based learning. We know that engagement leads to success, and that when students are more engaged actively in their learning, that everyone in the classroom benefits. So I see more of that now than I did maybe 15 years ago when I started teaching.
Yeah.
I also see a lot more individual support for students now, a lot more interventionists, reading specialists supporting children in early childhood now than I did when I started teaching. Oftentimes, I think in the early part of my career as a kindergarten teacher, I would hear, yes, we have an interventionist, but they work mostly with our older kids. And now early childhood intervention has really, in the schools that I observe, become an important priority for our teachers and our students.
Why do you think? Like why? So like, okay, if 10 years ago we or a school didn't have those resources, what would then, I guess, happen to like the kids who should have been receiving it or something? Like what is their future?
Well, I think we had less kids. I mean, 20 years, I've been teaching so long that we had less kids even going to preschool. It wasn't unusual at the beginning of my career for kids to walk into my kindergarten
At 5.
room having never walked into a classroom before.
Yeah.
And that's really unusual now in most of the schools that I work in. So students just have more opportunities to start school earlier. And as a result, we're starting those and we're catching, I guess, things that need to be addressed.
I never thought about that.
Or because kids are put in a system that isn't developmentally appropriate to their age, now they can't learn those skills like peer interaction, frustration tolerance, all that stuff in a natural way, and like at the playground, right?
Right.
You're putting them into, and like I did it. My kids were in at 6 months. I had to work, but And it's like you're expecting a 3-year-old to kind of behave like a 6-year-old.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yep.
And anyway, so yeah.
Even the length of their day. We
Correct.
used to have half-day
Yeah.
kindergarten,
Yes.
and that doesn't really exist anymore. Aftercare,
Yeah.
and these things need to happen so parents can
Work.
do their jobs and support
Yeah.
their families. But that affects how kids behave at school.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so what about, I mean, I'm curious about like academic standards. So like not necessarily curriculum, but like what, like have the standards of like grade level standards, have those changed in 20 years?
Absolutely.
Okay,
and
talk.
it's really kind of gone up and down. So
Oh,
at the
interesting.
beginning of my career, definitely, like I said, kindergarten was the first time that some of the students walked in my room.
Like 2004?
Yes, 2005 was my first year teaching.
And then No Child, I'm just trying to like, I'm like, ding, ding, ding.
I was Katrina year.
Yeah. Oh God. So
fun way to start.
Yeah, that's glorious. So like that was like No Child Left Behind.
Right.
About got it.
And
Okay.
at my school at the time, 20 years ago, it was a public school. You only were in preschool at my school if you qualified.
What does that mean?
So you had to either have
The birthday.
You had to have some sort of eval and some sort of
Oh,
requirement.
what? What do you
Speech
mean?
Or economical requirements, but you had
Oh,
to
you had to have a
qualify for preschool. If not, you started in kindergarten, or you went to a private preschool. But to qualify for a public preschool at my school, there was one class,
Wow.
one pre-K, and then 6 kindergarten. So you can imagine the
Yeah.
number of students that we received that were brand new to school.
Yeah.
So that was completely you were catering
Yeah.
to a completely different type of child
Yeah.
than you are
Yeah.
now when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
had never engaged in school.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny though, because one of my favorite curriculums is also one of the oldest social emotional curriculums. It's been around for 40 years, so roughly the same age as me. And that curriculum was a huge focus in my very first school 20 years ago.
Interesting.
I don't know if y'all are familiar with responsive classroom approach to social
I've heard of it.
emotional.
I've heard of it.
It involves a morning meeting to just kind of to create a family dynamic in your
Yeah.
classroom and allow for a greeting and sharing activity, and then a lot of interactive modeling. But responsive classroom was a huge focus in my very first room, my very first year. And those kids needed it. 'Cause
Yeah.
They needed to be taught
How to do.
How do we get in a line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
How
that?
do we sit on the carpet?
Yeah.
How do we sit
And, like, why?
crisscross applesauce,
Yeah.
right? They've never had to do these things, so we kind of had to start at the very beginning
Yeah.
of just this is how a classroom works.
Yeah.
And then I think I saw the trend later in my career, and of course I've worked in lots of different types of schools where there was a real academic push in kindergarten.
Yeah.
We want to get these kindergarten kids reading,
Yeah.
right? They should be
And
reading
writing.
fluently. Yes.
And like writing, you're not supposed to know how to write in kindergarten, like yet.
And this push didn't just come from the school. A lot of it came from the parents.
Yep.
Oh, what do you mean?
I noticed when this child came over to our house that she's reading a level this book and my kid's only reading a level this book. What's going
Comparing.
on with that? How do we get them higher? This sort of
And
push
and these are
to
like the
read.
people who are like funding the school. Yeah. Okay, keep going.
So there was a lot of push from
Yeah.
I think everyone to get kids reading earlier. Now I've seen the trend sort of level out, for lack of a better term. Or certainly we have these academic skills that we want to accomplish in kindergarten, right? We want to get them reading predictable text. We want to get them blending, all those kind of early skills to get them ready for first grade. But there's this understanding that their reading level or their exact levels is not the focus. It's, are they applying the skills they're being taught? Are they understanding and applying what's happening in the classroom in all aspects of their curriculum?
So like give me an example of like, I guess a standard. You know what I mean?
So reading predictable books in kindergarten.
Okay,
right?
what's
so that's
that?
a big standard. So can they read books like I see the cloud, I see the man, right, on each page, kind of those early texts. We don't expect them, although some do, to read fluently and kind of go much past that in kindergarten, but we want like sight words in place, basic sight words. We want basic blending skills. But when I talk to parents, I usually tell them I'm much more concerned with your child pulling out that tool out of her toolbox. So when she comes to a word she doesn't know, is she trying to blend that word out? I want to see
Grit.
her pulling those tools out.
Yeah.
That's more important to me than whether she's reading a B, a C, or a D.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to see that she's applying what she's learning. Right. And I think there's been more of a focus this year or in the past couple of years to applying what they're learning and growth. Growth instead of overall academic achievement. We're
So it's
even
like the
seeing that on our
effort,
tests.
the effort instead of the result.
Right.
Yeah.
When our students take home their standardized tests, we see their placement and then we see their growth. And
Yeah.
growth is a real focus. Are they learning and growing in class versus what level are they
And
above
that,
or behind?
and I don't know if that, so like I worked at a charter school for about 8 years, and that it's like that growth, like you would get in addition to like the grade they would get each year because of the test scores, they would also get a grade for growth.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah. So like you could be a D school. I mean, this isn't representing anything. This is out of my, ass.
Hypothetical. Yeah.
Hypothetical.
Okay.
Like you could be a D school based on test scores, but you could be an A school for growth. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
like if your kids are testing or their test results are approaching basic, okay? And they came from whatever, I don't know what the lowest thing is, but they got to approaching basic, like a percentage, whatever, then you would get an A for growth because you're moving them.
It's too bad we can't do that for individual kids.
What do you mean?
Like that you can get a grade for growth.
I mean, what do you mean? What do you mean?
If you start out as an F student and then you get to a C.
You don't think people are getting praised for that?
No.
Oh.
Do
I
you?
think it's something interesting to
I
think
mean, maybe
about
it depends on the school.
when teachers are writing their narrative comments.
Yeah.
I think teachers are getting better. I've seen a lot of details about what your child's doing well and how they're growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I write my reports for students, there's areas of growth.
Yep.
And I just document how they've grown.
Yeah.
And we have some goal setting and what goals they've achieved. We don't do letter grades in early childhood a ton
Yeah.
in most of the schools I work in. So it's really a lot of narrative and skill-based
Yeah.
assessments. And you can really see, okay, last time she knew 16 letters, now she knows 24. We feel good about her progress.
Yeah. And like, wait, narrative. What did you say? Oh, yeah. It's this. And then it's the, okay, wait, now I just confused myself. Help me.
I have a question though.
Okay,
while
go.
you're thinking about
Yeah.
that. Okay. Can you talk about that? Like because you work mostly in schools that don't have letter grades for elementary school, but not every school is like that, right?
Right, correct.
Okay. Can you talk about pros and cons of that? Because I have my own.
Sure. I mean,
Preferences?
There's a ton. And I think the question is sort of not, should we ever have letter grades? Because I think most schools get
Yes,
to that
at some point. Yeah.
And it's when do we start, right? So in early childhood, it's primarily skill-based.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like that in every school. There might be some schools that have letter grades in kindergarten, but mostly I see skill-based performance and then a narrative that goes with it. It's like the first grade year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When we decide, do we want to do letter grades?
Yeah.
Do we want to do skill-based assessment? Do we want to do both? Is that
Yeah.
too much for the teacher? How much of a narrative is reasonable when you have 24
Yeah.
kids in your class?
Yeah.
These are all kind of great conversations to have. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think as a parent, some parents are like, I don't understand what the skill-based assessment, it could be intimidating. It's usually a
Yeah.
big chart that has
Yeah.
a bunch of skills and
Yeah.
a 1,
Yeah.
2, 3 and a code system. I just want to know an A is good, a C, we're still working,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So for parents, sometimes the letter grade is beneficial. Sometimes they're like, well, what does a B in reading mean? I want to know
Yeah.
where they are.
Right.
Yeah.
What I think has been most helpful is having some sort of parent-teacher conference
Yeah.
during that grading period. So no matter what you're handing the parent, you're also right there to discuss the progress with them. I'm way more interested in I have 2 boys and my own children. I want to hear how he's doing in class, what growth he's seeing, what
Right.
his strengths are. I want to hear that from you. That means more to me than whether he got a 1 or whether he got a B or whether he got a 78,
Yeah.
whatever the grading system.
But then it's also, you have to think like, is the kid seeing the grades? And at what age? And
But
what does
like,
that do to them?
Yeah, but that's also a parent problem. You either put a value on the grade and make it a big deal or you don't. And like then that's going to trickle down to how the kid perceives himself as it relates to
Yeah,
the
but
grade.
like kids are going to have their own values that they put on it, right? Just
But,
because
like,
of
you
interacting
learn-
with other kids.
Yeah, but like that's life. You can't
guess.
just listen, I am all about cultivating an environment for growth and emotional safety and all the things. You're going to learn how to get a C.
I'm not talking about emotional safety. It's
Okay.
more like if you, as like a first grader, are getting C's and D's, what is your motivation to keep trying in school?
Yeah, fine. I mean,
That's,
Right?
That's
Like you're putting that idea in their head very young that like you're not really that good at school.
but I mean, you don't think they're feeling that way with or without a D?
I don't know. I think it's just like
hopefully if they're at the point where they're getting D's
Right.
or
There's
whether it's a
intervention.
D or a 68 or however it's graded on their grading scale, they're looking at their grades and they're not satisfied with it, right? So hopefully they're in some sort of intervention and support where we're monitoring their progress and we can help support them to get them where they need to be.
Yeah.
Also, I think that's where I know that when our teachers fill out those just narrative comments and say what their child did really well,
Yeah.
that can be really impactful. So
Yeah.
maybe
And
you see that you
empowering.
got to see that's challenging. But look, your teacher also said you're really great at interacting with your peers and helping your peers when they
Yeah.
need help.
Yeah.
You know, I think that can kind of counterbalance that. Okay, so I'm still struggling in math, but
Yeah.
I can be a really great friend in math and help a
Yeah.
friend who's still struggling too, and that makes me feel better.
Yeah. God, this keeps happening.
Okay, I have another one, so I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so tell us like what are the benefits of
what
this
it
like
is, I gotta write it
child-centered learning, more project-based versus like I mean, what would you compare? Would you contrast that to like more testing-based, standardized testing, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so I mean, it can be, right? Because if a teacher's just teaching and they're teaching the curriculum that they know is going to be on the standardized test, then you can do better on the standardized test. I think in general, we're going towards a trend of yes, but student engagement's important.
Yeah.
But students
Buy-in.
understanding that the teacher is not the source of all knowledge and that they can learn from each other.
Yeah.
That's huge in kindergarten and in early childhood because they tend to think my teacher knows everything and I'm just here to listen to her
Yeah.
and she'll tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And getting past that idea to like, hey, so-and-so's a really an expert on dinosaurs. You always in early childhood have one kid that knows
Yeah.
way more than you
Yeah.
about dinosaurs
Yeah,
or about
reptiles,
planets
yeah.
or transportation.
Yeah.
So kind of fostering that. And that can kind of, I think, for my students that are sometimes receiving intervention and don't feel as confident in maybe their reading ability
Yeah.
or their math ability, my one rule is I do not pull them out of project-based learning.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's their time to shine.
To be the
Yeah.
expert.
Maybe
Yeah.
I can't blend words as well as some of my friends, but ask me about space.
Yeah, correct.
So having those moments to be the expert, and you do in kindergarten sometimes get to see like these mic drop moments.
Yeah.
Where it's like this child that the other children have seen can struggle with certain parts of your classroom. All of a sudden they tell you about the planets and all the kids are like, whoa.
Yeah.
This kid is amazing,
Yeah.
right? So I think it gives children who don't in the traditional sense always come up on top in the classroom
Yeah.
an opportunity to shine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
or it's like, you know, you have the kid, I'm sorry.
Go
You,
ahead.
like, you know, you might have a kid who doesn't perform well on tests, but they are like have a really creative imagination. And so they're going to come up with great ideas. And like, you always need a person like that in
Right.
a project or someone who is a leader, you know, and is going to like organize everybody and delegate. Like, I think that's like allowing kids to build on their strengths, play on their strengths, and not overvaluing like their their letter grades on a test.
And it can be a hard transition for teachers who aren't used to it because
Yeah.
it tends to be louder. It can be
Yeah.
a little messier.
Yep.
But I think once teachers take a step back and just see the benefits in their classroom and get to know their kids in a different way. What I always tell teachers is once you start project-based learning and you just watch as they start their projects, your narratives and your report cards are going to be written for you.
Yeah.
Well, it
You're going to
probably
have so many details about your kiddos.
it probably in some ways maybe ends up being less work for the teacher, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like you kind of like let it play out, like whatever plays out. I mean, I don't want to. I'm not a teacher. I've never been a teacher, so I don't know. But I would think like you might have to do like less like organization, planning, management, whatever. If the kids are kind of like their own teaching unit, you know.
I think if it's been introduced and modeled
Yeah,
really well,
yeah,
the
yeah,
students can kind of take over. It may be more in the beginning, but
Yeah.
then you get to kind of take that step
Yeah.
back. I think project-based learning in particular can be intimidating because there's no curriculum to follow.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes as a teacher, myself included as a teacher, it can be comforting to be like, okay, day one, Monday I'm going to teach this. Tuesday I'm going to teach this. Project-based learning doesn't necessarily work like that.
Yeah.
So it can... You can't plan like you can for other curriculums.
Yeah.
It's not right there for you. So that's where someone coming in as a consultant to kind of plan out your first
Yeah.
couple units with you
Yeah.
and be right there. And that's a part of what I do. Kind of
Yeah.
be right there and say, okay, you want to do a unit on space? This is where you can start. This
Yeah.
is what that phase one of your project-based learning curriculum is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of have the teachers go from there with that curriculum ready for them, can give them some comfort as they start going from teacher-led learning to student-led learning.
So you're kind of giving them a roadmap
Exactly.
to go off of.
Yeah.
Because it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
totally. I would be overwhelmed. Talk to me about the it's child-led. What is it called? Sorry,
Student-led learning or
Student-
project-based learning is a particular style of
Okay,
that.
so child-led, project-based learning, and behaviors. Talk to me.
That can be challenging. So that's another hesitation. It's like when you're teaching and the students are all quietly doing work at their desk, some of those issues that can come up when still children are struggling with problem solving or with interacting with one another, it can get more challenging. That's why when we have a student-led learning or a collaborative learning unit that we want to start, we also want to make sure we have that social emotional curriculum in place. We have to teach students how to listen to each other and interact cooperatively with one another before we can expect them to engage in a unit together.
Right.
So having those sort of models, I think, is really important before you start that.
Yeah. How do you... Okay, so let's say yes. And, you know, Billy Bob is like still rolling around on the carpet or moving around the room when the expectation is to be at your table working with your group, or like grabbed a pencil out of like his table mate's hand. Then like, what do? You know what I mean? Like, how do you not be like, I don't like the word, like, how do you not be like the expert and like manage a classroom?
Still make the classroom function correctly, right? And keeping in mind that if your classroom's louder and messier, that students that maybe struggle with the sort of sensory overload are going to struggle with that a little more. Choice is also a big factor in student-led learning. So sometimes when students have more control over the piece that they're working on or what they're doing, that can curb some of those issues with behavior. So if I am deciding I want to make a mural about space, or I want to draw a picture, or I want to make a block representation of it. Sometimes when I have those choices, that can curb some of those behaviors. I also think if I have a child who I know it's going to be a louder day in my classroom, and I know that that's going to be something that's a catalyst for some of his or her behaviors, I can go to that child before and say, okay, we're doing our project-based learning unit. I know you love working on your space project. It's going to be a little louder in the room. Let's pick a spot where you can go. That's going to be a quieter spot in the room. You can have your headphones or whatever, you know, we have in place to kind of support him during that time, and maybe just giving him a heads up. This is going to be that time in the day when the room might be louder. Here's your spot to go. Here's your resources that you have. This is what you're going to work on.
So like planning ahead and being really prepared. What about if a kid like talks back? You know what I mean? It's like,
so you're saying like I'm an expert and kind of taking that to the next level where
like, what we're building? Oh shoot, we're painting the paper that's in with our group project. I don't want to. I'm not doing it. So then what? Is there a consistent and predictable way to manage a classroom and be child-led?
Yes. I think there is. I think those issues will come up, and it's up to the teacher to decide too if students can change their project once they're engaged in it. So if I've committed to do a mural with you two, and then it's not working either because I'm not working well with you or because I just saw this really awesome block representation over here and I want to do that, can I change or do I need to stick with what I originally said? That's a teacher call.
Yeah, correct.
I also think it depends on the age of the child and just kind of where they are. Can they consistently stay with a project for a couple of days or do they need to move on? But also, just when you set up the organization, it's organized chaos, right? So the children still have expectations that need to be outlined before.
Okay.
When you're working on your projects, you need to stay in this space at this table if you're working on the mural project.
Okay.
Or you need to be on the floor in this carpeted area doing this. I think you can still have expectations for where you are and what you need to be doing. And it can look chaotic in the room, but when you look at all the kids working, you see the organization behind it. Yeah. I also think if you have something like a morning meeting in your classroom, you already have opportunities to discuss this. So maybe the next time at morning meeting, you'll say, boys and girls, I noticed that there were some friends that were having trouble during project-based learning. I noticed that there were some friends that weren't helping their friends during their project. What can we do about that? And see what the kids suggest. Would it be helpful for us to move to a different table, move to a different location, separate kiddos? So you can have those discussions with them because you have that morning meeting time set aside for the social emotional piece too.
With the kindergarten?
I do that as young as
kindergarten. Okay, I'm going to push back. Sorry. Okay.
Oh, go for it.
This is like the whole point of this is just to open up conversations and perspectives. So when a 5-year-old, like when, let's say there's a kid that's consistently like disruptive, whatever, and how it's addressed is like putting the responsibility back on the kids to problem solve, right? They like developmentally, they're not ready to do that. And, or there's a speech delay, or there is an autism diagnosis, or a specific learning disability, or a developmental delay. So, like, is it developmentally appropriate to kind of like return responsibility back to them when it comes to problem solving, like peer interactions, or like you didn't work like you three didn't work whatever helpful with each other. What are some ways that we can figure this out?
Right. So in responsive classroom, there's a component called interactive modeling.
Okay.
And interactive modeling basically says the first step is the teacher has basically like we used to call them think alouds in the old years. It basically models what they want the child to do.
Okay.
This can be for an academic skill, but it can also be for social emotional skills, or just routines in your room. How do we line up any of those skills? Then there's a discussion about it.
Okay.
Then a couple students are picked to model that same skill. Then it's discussed again. Then everybody practice together. So you're not leaving the kids in this blank space of like, we have a problem, y'all figure it out.
Okay.
I'm pulling my friend, and I'm saying, I may pull the assistant in the classroom to kind of help me and say, okay, boys and girls, we're having a lot of friends who are fighting at the mural table.
Okay.
And then I might say, you know what, Miss So-and-so, come and help me. We're going to do this together.
Okay.
We're going to practice we're fighting over the same crayon.
Okay.
I'm going to stop. Oh, I'm going to notice that there's another set of crayons at the other table. I'm just going to get another crayon, and I'm going to go, whatever you want them,
So
whatever
role
tools
play.
you want them to have, you kind
Your
of role
play.
play that think aloud.
Okay.
And then once you've given that example, then have the students discuss it. What did you notice that Miss Katie
got
did?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Miss Katie went and got crayons from another table.
Yeah.
Oh, Miss Katie kept her hands to herself, right?
Yeah.
She didn't touch her friend.
Yeah.
And then have a couple of friends that maybe you pick strategically, the ones that you know are going to be able to
Correct.
handle that
Right.
interaction,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you have those students practice. What did you notice that Sally did? She used a quiet voice. Her voice didn't get loud, right? So you're modeling all those things, and then everyone's practicing.
Okay.
And then you're going around scaffolding, especially to that
Right.
friend that
Yeah.
you know is struggling with this,
Yeah.
right? Oh, you kept your hands to yourself when
Yeah.
you practiced that skill.
Yeah.
So you're not leaving them in this, we have a problem,
Yeah.
5-year-olds
Okay.
fix it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You're guiding them, but you're also not telling them the answer, right?
Right.
You're modeling, and then you're discussing it.
Okay. So, all right. So that's great. I love all that. I do that in my sessions. And what are there components of that curriculum that, because it's we have identification, like awareness, right, of our body, our words, stuff. Is there then the follow-up of like, how does that impact the world around me? Like, oh, your body's, yes, like the kid who like just hates coloring is coloring. Your crayons on the paper, your body's so calm. That makes your friends feel so comfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we could talk about responsive classroom for the next 3
Yeah.
hours, right? But I happily could because I love it.
Yeah.
But like I said, having morning meetings, opportunities for sharing and discussion is a big part. This interactive modeling we've discussed, and
Yeah.
another huge component is
Yeah.
teacher language.
Okay.
And when I
Yeah.
tell teachers this,
Yeah.
I'm usually working with fabulous teachers
Yeah.
who do a lot of reinforcing language in their classroom. So the idea of reinforcing their students' positive behaviors and using
Yeah.
it's reinforcing, reminding, and redirecting in a responsive classroom.
Yeah.
Teachers are already doing all of that. It's just about tweaking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I, for the first part of my career, I did responsive classroom, then kind of got away from it for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do a lot of, boys and girls, Miss Katie loves the way you were sitting on the carpet. Miss Katie is so proud of you for your hard work today, right? And I don't think that any student is damaged by hearing Miss Katie is very proud of you.
Right.
However, if we in a responsive classroom kind of teaches us to take that part away, to leave yourself out of it, essentially. Children need to understand that they're doing positive things for the good of their community,
Right.
or because it has some sort of benefit for themselves and their
Yeah.
growth. and
Internal
stuff.
locus of control. Yeah.
So when you sit on your bottom, your friends behind you
Yeah.
can see. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
That helps us all to see. Is a better response, a better reinforcing language than Miss Katie's so proud of you for sitting on your bottom.
Because
Yeah.
you're putting a value on it.
Right.
And it's like, oh, I'm doing it because it makes someone else happy.
Right. So
Right.
that teaches like empathy and perspective taking and
Yeah, but like, well, no. Like if the teacher's like, oh, Miss Jessica loves when you're coloring when we're supposed to be coloring. Well, then it's like, oh, well, I love like her love. So I'm going to keep
Right,
doing
right,
it.
right.
Yeah. Anyways.
Right. And
Yeah.
a lot of times when teachers say, oh, I like the way so-and-so is doing that, really you're just kind of reminding all the other kids to do it too, right?
Exactly.
I like the way she's sitting on the carpet, so everybody else sits on the carpet the same way.
Right.
I think there's an authenticity to, we sit on our bottom so the friends behind us can see, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just real.
Yeah.
We're quiet in the hallway so the teacher that's teaching in the hallway can hear her boys and girls.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
The other piece, the benefit to themselves, would be things like instead of me saying, I'm so proud of you for finishing your morning work, it would be, you finished your morning work, now you get to go to free centers.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
When you do something good, there's a good
you get a
response
reward.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the I like how Susie's sitting silent. I like how I don't even take the like out. Susie sitting silent.
Yep.
Beebe-de-bop, crisscross applesauce. You know, it's narrate, and that. This is like my charter school life or whatever. But like I use it. I literally started using it with my kids, like at my kids, my children.
You're at your own home.
At my own home. What, you annoyed?
No, I'm not annoyed at all. You go, girl.
But anyway, so yeah, I think that like narrating piece is important too, because then it's like they have to, I don't know, like promotes reflection.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And it kind of feeds into that whole collaborative learning project.
Yeah.
We're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
We're building a classroom community, so we sit on our bottom so
Yeah.
the people behind us can see too.
Yeah, like nothing's personal.
Right.
Like this is, it's, but seriously, it's
Yeah.
like, well, like, and you're saying it in like an unbothered way.
Right.
Like I'm not saying it in a way, sit down, you know, it's, oh, good job. Yep.
Just an
unbothered.
observation.
Observation. Yeah.
Okay, so this is awesome that you're doing all of this and that you're recognizing that, you know, the value of responsive classroom and the child-centered learning and all that kind of stuff. Is this happening elsewhere in the country? And if not, what do we do about it?
Is what happening?
Like are schools elsewhere like catching on that like kids are going to be more engaged and more motivated to learn and like, you know, they're actually going to develop their social emotional capacities better if they're doing like project-based learning than if they're just sitting there listening to a teacher and like taking a standardized test. Like I feel like that's probably not happening everywhere because there's so much focus on, you know, like the school grade and the rating and all that kind of stuff. So like, what do we do about that?
I think we have more and more data coming in
Yeah.
on the benefits of student-based learning and the benefits of when students are truly engaged. Also, this sort of one-fits-all school dynamic that doesn't work for probably half the kids in your classroom, right?
Yeah.
So we have lots of kids who are getting lots of extra support simply because they don't fit the mold of the
Yep.
student that sits in their desk all day.
Yes.
So I think we are beginning as a culture to recognize that not everybody learns the same way.
Right. Yeah.
And to adapt our learning in response to that. As more data comes out that says that too, I think it can be scary because I
Yeah.
think especially not so much early childhood teachers, they kind of rock at this.
Yeah.
But as we get
Yeah.
older, middle school, high school, I just have all these standards I need to cover.
Yeah.
And I think that's fair too.
Yeah, it's pressure.
That's absolutely
Yeah.
true, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't cover the standards, it's on them.
Right.
Yeah,
So
it's a reflection on
I
their
hear
ability to
that
teach.
A lot with teachers, it's like, I want to do all this stuff. I'm
Yes.
here for that.
But I need a
Yeah.
job.
But I also have standards I need to cover.
Which is so unfair to the teachers, you know?
Right.
Because it's like you don't really get to teach in the way that you want, in the way that you wanted to, like, that's why you wanted to become a teacher, right?
Pushback. Okay,
go.
fine. I'm just like thinking of a potential problem. What if you have like a fabulous teacher who is like, I don't know, like a magician and is just like meeting every kid where they are, you know, like whatever. And it's just like the bomb. But then they go to the next grade and that teacher teaches completely differently.
Yeah.
And they fall behind. So it's like this delicate dance. And then it's like, if all of these schools did what is it called? Responsive classroom, or child-led program. What is it called?
social emotional programs.
No. The
Child-led learning, project-based learning.
project-based learning. Like, if it's done in the way that you're saying, like, can that be reproduced with fidelity? I don't know.
Right now, in a lot of schools, and when I introduce project-based learning the first day, right?
Yeah.
I talk about how essentially there's so much data to prove that our 3 and 4-year-olds are creative geniuses.
Yeah,
And
they
then
are.
by the time they get to be older, we lose a lot
Yes,
of that.
correct.
So
Yeah.
that's why project-based learning can be beneficial, and I talk about all of this. And teachers tend to tell me, yep, totally in, that makes sense to me,
Yeah.
right? But I still have all this stuff to cover. How am I supposed to do all of this?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to get in depth on dinosaurs? I'm all in, totally, let's do it. But I still have all this curriculum. Even early
Yeah.
childhood teachers are telling me that. Project-based learning doesn't have to be an all-in, all-the-time program. So it can be you're either in a project or you're not. So
Okay.
right now we're in our transportation project. That's what we're going to do in the fall. In the spring, we're going to do a project on gardening and plants, and those are going to be our 2 PBLs for the year.
Okay.
When we're not in a PBL, we're more focused on a traditional classroom.
Oh, okay.
That can be kind of a baby step into it, so that next year, if you're all in on PBL, you're
Yeah.
right, in 2nd grade and then 3rd grade, you
Yeah.
have a more traditional teacher. That can be a hard adjustment for the kiddos.
And like take out any learning differences
Right.
too, you know?
Yeah.
So you can have those opportunities, but it not be all encompassing in your classroom. And I think when teachers find that out, there's like this sigh of relief. Okay.
Yeah.
I can still get to all the phonics that I need to get to, all the reading skills, all the math skills that I need to teach, and have these moments for student-led learning.
And I think with teachers, unfortunately, it's like now ingrained this like all or nothing mentality. Like it needs to be all like this or none of it. Like there's no like, incorporation. And then one last thing about this. Love the project-led learning, child-led stuff. And I think there's a huge benefit of having consistent, predictable behavioral expectations across the whole school.
Yeah.
School culture. And you have your values. And this is like charter school stuff. And it's effective because teachers don't have to think. Like disrespect means one thing at this school and it's X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Whether you're in kindergarten or you're 12th grade.
Right.
You know what I mean? So then that leaves more room in their brains to learn because they don't have to figure out if this means disrespect in this classroom.
But not in that
but
one.
not in that one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. So we're at 40 minutes and because I feel like what would happen is we're going to go on and then we're going to go over. So I don't want to do that. So we're just going to have you back because I have like a laundry list of things and I'm sure you do too.
Same, always.
That you want to talk about. But tell the people how they can get in touch with you, get services, all of that stuff.
Okay, great. So I'm a teacher as well, a student support teacher, but I also work as a consultant. I'm the early childhood consultant, but we're a team of consultants that work together. I work for JDL Innovative Solutions. So if you're interested in getting some teacher professional development on project-based learning, student-led learning, responsive classroom, or there's a bunch of colleagues, one works with technology, one works with more middle school-based, God bless her, middle school based programming. If you're interested in any of that, you can contact me, Katie, Katie, at jdlinnovativesolutions.org, and we can get you in line with somebody that'll work with you and your students and teachers.
Do y'all have like an Instagram or anything like that?
We do, but
not the best.
It's probably best to just contact me and I can get you to the right
Okay,
spaces.
great.
Awesome.
Katie, thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Katie.
Thank you very much.
People,
Thank y'all for
remember
having
to
me.
hit subscribe, like, watch, all the things. Peace out.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. Hopefully you know you're not alone and we're all in the trenches together.
We're always here, so reach out and let us know what's driving you nuts. We got you. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Little Brain Campaign on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Questions or topics you want us to tackle? Hit us up on all of our socials at the Little Brain Campaign. Keep trucking. You got this. We'll see you next week.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Remember, no one size fits all. Always consult a professional for personalized advice.